Hi, guys. Welcome to my 7 round Kansas City Chiefs mock draft. As we can see here, they have 8 picks in this year's draft. Looking at their depth chart, obviously, what many people have said is that, hey, this O-line is rough. Obviously, you do have two cornerstone line pieces in Humphrey and Smith, but then you have the holding machine, as we all know, in Jawaan Taylor, Jalen Moore, and then Kingsley Suamatea, who's replacing, obviously, Tooney, who was traded to the Bears. So, looking at this team, I think they would be perfectly fine and content with moving forward with just this wide receiver room. I think Rashee Rice, unless he comes back or they're not sure about him, I don't think, unless you want to see like a late round, wide receiver pick, I don't think they grab a wide receiver in this draft. I think Xavier Worthy proved that he can have that it factor. I mean, obviously in the Super Bowl is kind of garbage time, but he was still kind of beating those DBs, that were getting a little over cocky type of thing. Hollywood Brown, I think, had some chemistry issues due to the injury and not being able to play all year. And like I said, Rashee Rice, if he comes back very well, then they're fine. And then it's like Smith Schuster, not bad. Sky Moore, the guys that they're used to. And then it's like Kelsey's coming back, and then you still have Noah Gray. So you still have solid tight ends. It still would not surprise me if they went and grabbed one if the right one was available, because Kelsey, I think, is going to retire here soon. It's just the reality. It doesn't seem like he's going to play late into his 30s for very long. But then the running backs, I think, is fine. They grabbed Elijah Mitchell, who I think will, they'll make him look a lot better than not that he actually is, but they know how to use these guys. It's like P. Ryan last year. P. Ryan, impact player, but was like the third on the depth chart. Moving to the defense, you obviously have Karlaftis, Jones, Mike Donnas, is a beast, honestly. Nick Bolton, a beast. McDuffie, a beast. Obviously, you let Reed go, probably because of the money issue. You really didn't have that much money. You bring in Christian Fulton, whom I honestly think that he could be, better. Spags does a really good job with his DBs and coaching them up. Chamari Connor's fine. The only thing I might say on the defense that you might grab, potentially, is maybe an interior. Pennell, I think, is, obviously a little bit older. You could obviously use a replacement there. And oh my goodness, I just kind of closed that out. But so I think that the needs for this team are mainly O-line, possibly a tight end, possibly one wide receiver. And then perhaps you do go with like a safety you like, a DB you like, kind of best player available. Because I honestly think the Chiefs, if they weren't so banged up last year, they obviously compete a lot better against the Eagles, but they were pretty banged up and they were scratching by the skin of their teeth in a lot of games. But let's start the draft and we'll kind of see where it takes us, because the Chiefs, okay, and this is kind of wild. I don't know how this would happen. I don't know why this would happen, and I don't think people would be happy about this. Because it's like you look at, who's draft up here, and they just don't, they just happen to not like notice Malachi Starks, whom it's like, oh, you bring him in, maybe he's even a better Justin Reed, and you found that replacement in the first round. I don't know how he would ever make it this far down. Maybe because it's the premium position BS, and it's like, oh, you don't draft this in the first round. Well, we're drafting Malachi Starks, to be our stud safety. And then it's like who you can use a lot. And then we're going down and we kind of have like, and remember what I said about, hey, we need to draft O-line and that sort of thing. I think that, I honestly think that the Chiefs, yeah, they want to draft O-line, but they do know they have a stud defense. Shemar Turner, coming down this far, he played, with very high effort, and then it's like has a very good size. So it's like, it's strange that he also drops. We're going to do these two guys on the defense, and that we're going to call it, maybe on defense, but Shemar Turner, going that low is kind of wild to me. And then it's like, oh my goodness, we get here and we have Ursary, an early third round kind of prospect out of Minnesota, very good size. He's very, very, very good. And, that they're going to work on his run blocking in this scheme, and that it's, Isaiah Pacheco, should he return to form, they're going to get, what they need out of there. And I think this is a very good situation for Ursary to go to. And we're going to draft our tackle. Now looking here, oh my goodness, why does this seem like this is like falling into our laps type of thing? It might be crazy to say, but it's like, I do like Tate Ratledge here. Tate Ratledge, who, guard for Georgia, big school, big mauler. I think that, you look at kind of, the D line and, he plays right guard, could definitely move him to left guard. I don't think that would be too much of an issue. Kept the pocket clean. I think this guy comes in and he is your guy to draft, and go opposite Trey Smith, who they franchise tagged. Moving down to this spot, we have a few of these guys I actually would like. I'm not going to lie, Torrey Horton, I think, is a little bit different of a wide receiver than who they have. I think that, you kind of look at D-Hop, and obviously D-Hop's is a little bit bigger, stronger of a frame, but you kind of don't have any guy who's like a 6'3" dude. Maybe they go Torrey Horton, maybe they don't. You obviously have... you have Jack Kaiser right here, who it's like, I think you could bring him in, and I think you could really, have an off-the-ball guy. He is a little bit older, but overall just a very good, run defense grade. Not that they really need that sort of thing, but it's like you've got Bolton who can play everything. Perhaps you are looking at Chase Lund here, and who played tackle, and let's look at it, and he played a lot of right tackle. Perhaps this guy's your replacement for Jawaan Taylor, who did most things well, is a good size, a little bit leaner, but it's like maybe you're not getting as many holding calls with those long arms. So I think, you go on after this guy because you kind of know that Jawaan Taylor, it's not getting any better. I don't think it's getting any worse, but I don't think it's getting any better, type of thing. So there we've drafted, a couple tackles, a guard. What other kind of needs do they say have? We have drafted D-line as well as a safety, which I think is, you could say is a minor need, but I think we're kind of getting to this spot where it's like a lot of these QBs are falling. Maybe we look at Dumas Johnson, who I think, is a very good size. And I think that Spags does a really good job with the linebackers. Nick Bolton has improved, from his, and obviously he was a round 2 pick, but he's definitely proved to be one of the better linebackers in the league when it comes to, where he's at and where he was drafted type of thing. I think you could take Dumas Johnson, who has, very typical size, isn't performing as well. If he was performing, he'd be a lot higher. and, make him your other linebacker, that is maybe more of your coverage guy or run defense guy. Moving down here, we have Jalen Walker, could definitely be a guy to grab, but we still haven't grabbed, to me, like a wide receiver. And we do have Kyren Lacy here. Not a good contested catch rate, is a taller guy, a little bit older type of thing. Good production this last year, and, can play all over. So, getting 100 targets, under 500 snaps, I think is, very good. That means he was getting open and good TD production. I think the one issue I've always seen with the Chiefs, and I mean many might not see it as an issue, is that you see Mahomes doing his kind of floundering, outside the pocket dance that he does, and then he has to flip it because nobody is really getting open. And this guy doesn't really have, the contested catch rate that I guess you would want, but it's like maybe he has a size that, with some help and maybe better quarterback play, maybe he comes in and they polish this guy to maximize his health, and maybe has that potential guy that you improve and you put in situational football when you work with him. Moving on to our final pick. So we have not really a lot here. We're going to double down on wide receivers. We're going to go with that, and then we're also going to go with Rock Taylor here. I think Rock Taylor, I'm high on him. I think he should go. I don't think he should, if he's not drafted type of thing, and no suggestions here. So they were okay with me drafting Starks right here. And then it's like Shamar Turner goes late round 2. And it's like, and then you're drafting O-line. The wide receivers, obviously, to me, the only guy that they really had that was kind of a jump ball dude in some situations is they had Watson, but he is no longer on the team either. He left in free agency and they didn't seem to want to keep him. Maybe his price was too high. But overall, I think that this is a draft that's like, you really need to address the whole line. And, this could easily be like 4-4. And maybe they skip on Lacy. Could definitely skip on Lacy and then draft a guy here for 4 linemen amongst your 8 picks. Because we all know it. And, we're not to lie, I am thankful for it because I didn't want the Chiefs to three-peat. Not that I don't think that the players on their team are deserving, but I was kind of sick of it going their way each year. But, if you're a Chiefs fan, tell me what you think about this. And, obviously I think this is insane. I don't think Starks falls here. I definitely think they take him if he falls here. It seems like a no-brainer. And it's like, you can't tell me any of these other guys couldn't go for a game-changing safety, like Starks. But tell me what you think in the comments. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, go Pack Go.